I never expected betrayal in my own home. My whole life, I believed my mother was the person who always had my best interests at heart. I trusted her implicitly. Even when we clashed over small details, I always assumed it was for my benefit. But nothing could have prepared me for the day I discovered her secret. I was sitting in my tiny, cluttered apartment when an innocuous email notification flashed on my phone. I nearly dropped it in shock as I read the subject line, "Wedding cake order confirmation." My heart pounded and I felt my stomach drop as I scrolled through the details. It couldn't be real. I had told her not once, but multiple times that I was adamant about having no wedding cake. I wanted a simple ceremony, a quiet union with only the essentials. And yet, here was undeniable proof that my mother had ordered an extravagant wedding cake behind my back. I stared at the screen, unable to reconcile the evidence with the woman I thought I knew. Memories of our heated arguments replayed in my mind. "No, Mom, I don't need any cake. I told you so." I had shouted over the phone more times than I cared to remember. Every time I repeated those words, I hoped she'd understand that I was trying to keep the wedding modest, meaningful, and free of unnecessary frills. But it seems that my pleas fell on deaf ears. Instead of respecting my wishes, she acted behind my back, ordering the cake as if she were planning a spectacle I never wanted. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal that I had never experienced before. The room seemed to close in around me as I debated my next move. For a long moment, I simply sat there, numb, staring at the email that confirmed the deed. How could someone I loved so dearly disregard my feelings so blatantly? It wasn't just the cake, it was the blatant dismissal of my autonomy. This was supposed to be my wedding, a day I had envisioned for months, painstakingly planned with my own decisions in mind. And now, my mother's secret act threatened to overshadow everything I had worked for. I knew I couldn't confront her in anger immediately. I needed time to process, to gather my thoughts and consider the best course of action. Over the next few days, I meticulously compiled every message, every conversation where I had expressed my wishes clearly. I wanted to be sure of my memory, to have undeniable proof that I had been ignored. I reread text messages and listened to old voicemails, each reminder fueling my anger further. I wasn't planning to forgive, not now, not ever. If she thought she could betray me and then play the victim, she was sorely mistaken. On the day of our confrontation, I felt a mix of steely determination and a deep, simmering resentment that I had never experienced before. I called her and arranged to meet at a small cafe, a neutral ground where I could confront her without any pretense of family warmth. I arrived early, rehearsing my words in my head, each line sharpened with the promise of retribution. When she finally arrived, she looked as if she'd been expecting a pleasant catch-up, her eyes soft and apologetic. But I wasn't in the mood for apologies, not yet. We sat down, and I wasted no time. "Mom, we need to talk," I began, my voice surprisingly calm despite the turbulent storm inside me. I slid my phone across the table, displaying the email confirmation. "Explain this," I demanded. Her face drained of color as she looked at the screen, and for a few long seconds, she couldn't meet my gaze. Finally, her voice came out in a tremulous whisper. I thought it would be a nice surprise. I wanted to do something special for you. For us." Her words, meant to be comforting, only ignited my fury further. "Special?" I spat, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. "You completely disregarded what I told you. I made it crystal clear. No wedding cake. This wasn't about you, it was about me and my wedding. You had no right to make that decision for me." I watched as her eyes began to fill with tears. Instead of remorse, I felt only a deep, burning sense of betrayal. "I trusted you to respect my wishes. You made a selfish decision, and now you're crying because you think you can manipulate me with your tears?" I couldn't believe the audacity of it all. Her voice broke as she tried to explain, but I wasn't interested in explanations. The damage was done, and nothing she said could undo the betrayal. I left the cafe that day with a resolve that surprised even me. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not without exacting a measure of revenge that would remind her of the cost of violating my trust. Over the next several weeks, I began to meticulously plan my counterattack. I wasn't interested in petty squabbles. I wanted something that would leave a lasting impression. I started by investigating every detail of the cake order. I called the bakery under a pseudonym, gathering information about when the order was placed, how much it cost, and any specifics that could be used against her. I discovered that not only had she ordered an enormous, ostentatious cake with elaborate decorations, but she had also spent a significant sum on it. Money that I knew had been earmarked for more practical wedding expenses. Armed with this information, I devised a plan that would hit her where it hurt most, her reputation. I knew that my family was closely knit and her actions would not remain a secret for long. I began by contacting relatives and close family friends individually, recounting the story in my own words. I explained how I had made it abundantly clear that there would be no cake, only for her to secretly order one anyway. I emphasized that this wasn't a harmless mistake. It was a deliberate act of defiance and disregard for my wishes. I made sure they understood the financial implications as well, outlining how her extraneous spending had jeopardized the modest budget I had worked so hard to maintain. As the story spread, I could see the expressions on people's faces: disbelief, disappointment, and even indignation. The narrative I wove wasn't exaggerated, it was rooted in the facts, but it resonated because it was a tale of betrayal by someone who was supposed to be a pillar of trust and love. I wasn't content with merely airing my grievances privately. I needed to make it public. I turned to an online forum, a popular subreddit known for its brutally honest and unfiltered confessions. I wrote a detailed post outlining everything that had happened, making sure to include screenshots of the order confirmation and snippets of our conversation. I explained that I wasn't interested in reconciliation, that trust, once broken, was irreparable. The response was overwhelming. Strangers from around the world chimed in, many echoing sentiments of betrayal and others offering support for my decision to call her out. Some even shared their own experiences of parental overreach, and in those stories, I found a strange comfort in knowing I wasn't alone. I kept my identity hidden, but the story spread like wildfire, and soon my mother's actions were the subject of heated discussions in family WhatsApp groups and even local gossip circles. The public exposure was the first step in my plan, and it made it abundantly clear that I wasn't someone to be trifled with, but I wasn't finished yet. The next phase of my plan involved turning the very cake she ordered into a symbol of my reclaiming control. I arranged a private meeting with the bakery manager, someone I had grown to trust over the course of my investigations. I presented the case and explained that I was willing to cover the costs, but under one condition: the cake would be remade to match the minimalist, understated style I had always wanted. The manager, who was sympathetic to my plight, agreed to cancel the extravagant order and instead create a modest dessert that would serve as a testament to my autonomy. The irony wasn't lost on me. The cake that was meant to be an act of defiance was now being transformed into a symbol of my strength. On the day of the wedding, as I stood at the altar with a calm determination, I felt a sense of closure that I had never anticipated. My mother was present, of course, her eyes betraying a mix of regret and resignation, but she said nothing. The new cake, a simple, elegant confection that perfectly matched the tone of the ceremony, stood as a quiet monument to my victory. When the time came for the cake cutting, I paused for a moment, looking directly at my mother. In that silent gaze, I conveyed everything: the betrayal, the pain, and, most importantly, the fact that I was in control of my own life. The reception was a bittersweet affair. While I celebrated my union with the person I loved, I couldn't shake the feeling that a part of me was still reeling from the public shaming of someone I once trusted implicitly. But I knew deep down that forgiveness was not an option. The truth was, I had learned a hard lesson about boundaries, respect, and the lengths one must go to protect one's identity. I never forgave my mother for the betrayal, not because I held on to bitterness, but because I recognized that sometimes the only way to reclaim power is to refuse to let someone else dictate the terms of your life. In the days and weeks that followed, the ripple effects of my actions became increasingly apparent. Family gatherings, once warm and unburdened by underlying tensions, became charged with unspoken accusations and awkward silences. Relatives who had once admired my mother's generosity now questioned her judgment and motives. I, for my part, became a symbol of uncompromising resolve, a person who had taken a painful betrayal and turned it into an act of reclaiming self-determination. I was not seeking vengeance for vengeance's sake, but rather a restoration of balance in a relationship that had become irreparably skewed. One evening, several months after the wedding, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. It was from my mother. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. When I finally did, I read a lengthy apology, filled with remorse and pleas for forgiveness. She recounted the reasons behind her actions, claiming that she had thought she was helping me and that she had never intended to hurt me. The letter was heartfelt, but it also reeked of the same patronizing tone that had so infuriated me from the start. She assumed that my silence would eventually equate to forgiveness, that I would, over time, allow her back into my life as if nothing had happened. I sat there for hours, the letter spread open before me, and realized that I had no intention of forgiving her. I had come too far to allow her manipulation to undo all the progress I had made. The act of revenge wasn't about revenge alone. It was about establishing boundaries and reaffirming that my voice mattered. I penned a brief reply stating that I had read her apology, but that I wasn't ready to forgive or forget. I explained that trust, once broken, was not easily mended, and that while I hoped she would learn from this, I had to prioritize my own well-being. I mailed the letter without looking back. The fallout of that confrontation rippled through every aspect of my life. Friends who had once been caught in the crossfire of family drama began to see the situation more clearly, and many reached out with words of support. I found solace in the fact that I had taken a stand, that I had refused to be the victim of someone else's misguided sense of control. I started attending therapy sessions to help process the complex emotions swirling inside me: betrayal, anger, and a deep-seated sense of loss. The sessions were cathartic, helping me understand that while I had every right to be angry, I needed to channel that anger into something constructive. One breakthrough moment came during a particularly intense session. My therapist asked me, "What does forgiveness mean to you?" I paused, considering the question. In that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the wrongdoing. It was about freeing myself from the weight of perpetual resentment. But I also recognized that forgiving her would be a concession, a silent admission that her actions were acceptable in any form. I wasn't willing to do that. Instead, I chose to redefine forgiveness as an internal process of moving forward without condoning the betrayal. I resolved to channel my energy into rebuilding my life and establishing healthy boundaries with those around me. My wedding day, once a memory tainted by betrayal, gradually transformed into a symbol of my personal growth. Each time I recalled that day, the way I confronted my mother, the silent exchange during the cake cutting, I felt a renewed sense of empowerment. I had taken a situation that could have shattered me and turned it into a catalyst for change. I became more selective about who I allowed into my inner circle, and I learned that true strength lay in standing firm against those who sought to undermine your autonomy. As time passed, my mother's attempts to reconcile were met with a cool indifference. She tried to insert herself into my life with well-meaning gestures, a surprise birthday gift here, an impromptu visit there, but I remained guarded. Each encounter was a reminder of the betrayal, and I wasn't about to let her manipulate me with guilt or tears. I began setting clear boundaries, often with a calm yet unyielding tone. I explained that while I appreciated her efforts, I needed space to heal and rebuild. My stance wasn't one of malice, but of self-preservation. The satisfaction of my carefully executed revenge wasn't about humiliating her in a petty manner. It was about reclaiming my identity and reinforcing the idea that my decisions mattered above all else. I realized that I had been living in a shadow, one cast by the expectations and unsolicited interventions of others. By standing up for myself, I stepped into the light of my own agency, a transformation that resonated deeply with everyone who knew my story. Today, I continue to move forward with the lessons I learned from that painful experience. I no longer allow anyone, even family, to dictate the course of my life without my explicit consent. My journey hasn't been easy. There were moments when the bitterness threatened to consume me, but I now understand that revenge is most potent when it comes in the form of reclaiming what is rightfully yours. My wedding, my life, and every decision I make are a testament to that truth. Looking back, I see that the betrayal was a turning point. It forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about trust, control, and the sometimes painful path to self-assertion. I now live each day with a heightened awareness of my own worth, and I refuse to let anyone's misguided attempts at control diminish that. The memory of that fateful email and the confrontation that followed serves as a constant reminder that I am the master of my destiny. In the end, my mother's secret cake order was not just an act of rebellion, it was the spark that ignited my transformation. I turned a moment of deep betrayal into an opportunity for self-empowerment, and though the scars remain, they no longer define me. They serve as a reminder that boundaries are sacred and that the price of betrayal is the loss of trust, a loss that, once incurred, can never be fully restored. I share this story not to incite further bitterness or to dwell on past wounds, but to offer a glimpse into the strength that emerges when you stand up for yourself against all odds. For anyone who has ever felt undermined or controlled by someone they trusted, know that you have the power to reclaim your life. It might require difficult choices and hard-fought battles, but the reward is a life lived on your own terms, a life where you call the shots, unapologetically and unyieldingly. And so, I move forward with a quiet confidence. My mother's betrayal, though painful, taught me the value of self-respect and the importance of asserting my independence. I learned that true revenge isn't about inflicting pain on another. It's about rising above their actions and forging a path that is distinctly your own. I am no longer defined by someone else's misguided affection or misplaced generosity. I am defined by my choices, my resilience, and the unwavering commitment to live my life exactly as I see fit. This is my story. A story of betrayal, confrontation, and ultimately, self-reclamation. It is a reminder that even in the face of deep personal betrayal, there is a way to emerge stronger, more determined, and entirely in control of your own fate. I refuse to let anyone, least of all someone I once called family, undermine my autonomy. And as I continue to build the life I've always dreamed of, I do so with the firm understanding that true power lies in the choices we make, even when they are born from pain. I never imagined that a single, secret cake order could alter the course of my life so dramatically. Yet, in the wake of that discovery, I found within myself a strength I never knew I possessed. It is a strength that now defines every aspect of my life. A strength that reminds me every day that I alone am responsible for my own happiness and success. I carry this lesson with me as I look to the future, undaunted, unyielding, and ever ready to stand up for what is mine. In the end, revenge was not about causing suffering, it was about refusing to let someone else's actions dictate my happiness. I have no regrets about the choices I made, for they were born out of a need to assert my independence and protect the sanctity of my own life. I continue to embrace the lessons of that tumultuous time, knowing that every scar is a testament to the battles fought and the victories won. I stand firm in my belief that when pushed to the brink, it is our determination to reclaim our lives that ultimately defines who we are. This is not a tale of redemption or forgiveness. It is a story of resolute independence, where betrayal was met with a cold, calculated refusal to yield. I walk away from that chapter of my life stronger, wiser, and utterly uncompromising. And as I forge ahead into a future of my own making, I am forever reminded that true power comes from standing up for yourself, no matter how painful the cost may be. Every time I look back on that day, the email, the confrontation, the cold silence that followed, I feel a quiet satisfaction. I know that I have not only survived but thrived, turning a moment of betrayal into a defining milestone in my journey. And while my mother's actions may have once filled me with anger, they now serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of asserting one's own will. I live by the truth that I am in charge of my own destiny, and no one, especially not someone I once trusted implicitly, can ever take that away from me. My life is my own, and I will continue to shape it according to my values and my vision, free from the shadows of betrayal and control. This is the legacy of that fateful cake order, a lesson learned, a boundary set, and a future claimed with unwavering resolve.